is child?
I don't know.
But she was you.
She has no one else. We are not savages. Apes fight only to survive.
Bad human can kill ape. All dead now. A long time. Long time.
Bad humans.
Soldier.
Years from now, your children will ask you, what did you do in the greatest war? And you can tell them, I fought to protect this world. We created you. But now, we will bring an end to their kind.
No mercy, no peace. This is war. Apes together, strong.
You are impressive. You're smart as hell. You're stronger than we are. But you're taking this all much too personally. So emotional!
I did not start this war. But I will finish it.
Hi!
Keep clapping for this movie. It is so good. Keep clapping. Let's hear it. So many things to say about this movie, so much amazement that I felt because I've never seen a studio film like this, or at least in quite some time. Something that is, as I told you in the green room, so beautifully composed, so sort of soft in a way, even for a war movie. It's really incredible that, one, that you did it and that you were able to do it. Can you talk about the process of sort of getting this movie off the ground? It's definitely different than Dawn is, I believe.
Oh, thank you. You know, I think the thing that we wanted to do was to continue, the thing that's been different, each of these films has been very different, right? Rise is very different from Dawn, and Dawn is very different from War, but all of them really sort of take you along this journey that is about Caesar. And what I really wanted to do, when Mark Bomback and I, who wrote the script together, sat down, what we wanted to do was, for the first time, tell a story that was totally empathetic with Caesar's position for the whole movie. It's an 8-point-of-view movie, and to do a war movie that the most important war was the war inside of his heart, the war for his empathy, for him to maintain sort of himself. And it would be the last major test for him to become the seminal figure in ape history. The movie's, for us, almost like a biblical epic. Yes. But it was really fun because it was a very different movie from the last one, which I loved making, but this one felt like, hey, we can do something different and be really intimate at the same time that we could have spectacle. And then, you know, bring in all of these, you know, these guys, like, to bring in some really fresh tones that you hadn't seen, you know, some humor and some tenderness that just hadn't been in any of the films. So,
is it difficult in this day and age to have confidence in an intimate scale while at the same time trying to present spectacle? It seems like for the most part when we get spectacle, the majority of what we get is just spectacle, but this film is so good at storytelling and at the same time having an intimate tone a lot of the time.
Well, that's cool. Thank you. Well, you know, I mean, I think for me, you know, we went back and watched a lot of war movies, and for me, look, at the end of the day, the thing that is special about these movies is that you have an emotional relationship, most specifically to Andy and Caesar's character, right? And it's about intimacy, and the spectacle doesn't matter if you're not emotionally engaged. At least that's my perspective. And so, for me, in both films, the thread that was the most important was that I think the power of movies is that it puts you emotionally in the shoes of a character who you are not. It extends your sympathies. It's about being able to see yourself in someone else's experience, or in this case, in another creature's experience. And so I think that was never a question for me. To me, the emotionality is, here's the great thing. At this time of year, there are a lot of spectacles, right? And usually the spectacle has to do with a high level of action or a fantasy of superpowers or some sort of thing. But we have a very privileged spectacle here, which is that you are going to identify emotionally with apes. You're going to become an ape. So by watching this movie for 2 hours, you become, these characters. And I think that that's an uncanny experience. And if it were not for that, I don't think we could have made the movie. But it's also the pleasure of the movie, to get to come to this movie and relate to these characters in a very intimate way and to be moved by them. I mean, to me, the most exciting thing with Dawn and with War was the number of people who came out of the movie going, I didn't expect to cry. I didn't expect to have those emotions. And I think, it's a real testament to these guys that the fun thing about performance capture, because everybody's always thinking about the CGI, right? And this is a case where the CGI is all at the service of performance. And the movie is all about performance. And so, I think I feel privileged to have been able to work on these two movies to, in a blockbuster sort of arena, do something that is very intimate.
I think the focus on performance makes the film completely immersive. I never found myself at any moment in the movie going, oh, that's cool CGI or cool graphics. I was just completely involved in the story and the performance and the emotions of the characters. Andy, can you talk about developing Caesar up until this point, and how does your performance change when you're doing motion capture as your character changes?
Yeah, I mean, the thing to remember really is that performance capture, or motion capture as it was called, performance capture, because that's what it is basically acting. It's not a type of acting. It's not a genre of acting. You don't become a motion capture or performance capture actor. We are all actors playing roles, and some with costumes and makeup, and like us, some with suits with head-mounted cameras and markers on our faces. It's all about building a character. And what appealed to me originally back in the day with Rise was like, when you go into any project, you read the script, and when I saw what Caesar's journey was looking like, even in that first film, it just seemed like the most incredible opportunity. And that is the beauty of the technology. It does allow you, it's totally liberating. It allows you to play anything on this planet. You can anthropomorphize anything now. We have the capability of doing that, but you need a great story and a great character to do that with. And what I loved about Caesar, and when I first started playing him, was the fact that he was an outsider. He was a young chimpanzee brought up by human beings. He was orphaned, and he was the recipient of this drug which accelerated his evolution. So you're stepping into a character who feels outside. He's a human being in an ape's skin, and then when he eventually has to communicate with his own kind, he's thrown into an ape sanctuary. He then has to find his way he sees his own color really for the first time, sees his own skin for the first time, and tries to become a member of the ape community. And all the time, he's growing, he's becoming older, he's evolving as well. His emotional intelligence, his psychological kind of build, his physicality is changing. And he's perfectly placed to be this empathetic creature who is able to both love human beings and all apes, not just being tribal about being a chimpanzee. He can communicate with gorillas and orangutans, chimpanzees, bonobos. He sees them all as a family. And that's really, the approach was always that there is at the core of Caesar this empathetic creature who, when we go into Dawn, becomes after being a revolutionary leader at the end of Rise and taking them to freedom, he then becomes a sort of a father figure, not only father of his own children and family, but the father of a movement, father of a society, and he begins to create the template for how this ape society is going to build, which then of course fractures when there is an opposing force with Koba, who is you may well remember from Dawn, played by Toby Kebbell, his character who's suffered at the hands of humans and has no empathy for them whatsoever. He hates them and begins a war, which really, when we come into War for the Planet of the Apes, we find Caesar still trying to broker a peaceful deal with human beings. But for the events that happen at the beginning of the movie, he would probably still go on to try and do that. But Caesar, it takes a huge turn in his character at the beginning of War when he suffers personal loss and then is suddenly finds himself pitched into this journey of revenge and hatred. And so I've had the enormous kind of pleasure and honor of playing a character all the way through his life from infancy all the way through to late maturity, and go through these incredible kind of complex character changes, and not only because not only sort of aging and growing, but also evolving at a rapidly accelerating rate, where he's becoming more human-like, and to work with Matt and these guys, but Matt is such a brilliant storyteller because he is a fantastic actor's director, and the writing, the combination of the writing and his approach, and being able to really mine every single scene for its drama and truth and emotional content was just it's just been an extraordinary experience.
Now, Steve, this is your first time doing performance capture, right? And I'm curious because when you, as a viewer, when you watch performance capture and it's done as well as this, you don't get the idea of the actor doing the performance as much. And I'm wondering, when you step onto the stage as an actor, do you still have the same questions about your character for the director? Or are you still sort of like, why would I say this? Or where's my character coming from here? How does that feel, asking that, when you sort of know at the end of the day it's not going to be your face in the film?
It is my face. I mean, that's the thing that blew me away is that there's no difference in going to work being a mountain man who is isolated and somewhat excitable, who just happens to be a chimpanzee. When I go to work, we worked on the scenes, we rehearsed the scenes in the same way we would do anything. And that's what blew me away about it. I came into it naive, right? And I was floored when I'd go to a room, when you see in the movie, this cavern full of apes just standing there, that was filled with a room full of people in gray suits pretending to be apes. And I was told that, but when you experience it, you're like, wow, this is the closest thing I've done in film to theater. That kind of theater I did years ago. It's very liberating, and it's really scared me. I mean, to be honest with you, when I realized what it was all about, because I knew that it was the simplest form of acting, which is, and harder. I mean, it's hard to play a cop, right? It's really hard to play a cop who's a chimpanzee. It's harder. And it's your face. I mean, I watched the movie. I've seen it 3 times now. I don't think I've ever seen a movie I've done 3 times at screenings. I love watching it. And it's so fascinating to go, that's the take they used. Not that's the take they used where something fell on me. It's like, that's the take they used when I looked over to her, and you remember these things in your head. It's just part of your brain. Like, the one where the crackers fell out of my mouth, they used that take.
That's what I was.
And you recognize yourself. It's a really incredible experience when you see it, rendered in the final,
I was curious, is it easier for yourself as an actor to immerse yourself in the movie afterwards, as opposed to other movies where you're not sort of doing performance capture, or you're not rendered into another creature? Can you lose yourself in the movie a little bit more?
I think so. Maybe.
Yeah, possibly. Yeah, I think you can, because you've lived through it. You've become the character, but because you're removed, because you're disguised to that degree, it does actually allow you to watch it kind of objectively, which is great.
Yeah. Amiah, you were telling me backstage that you would do a lot of things twice, once with the other actors and then once alone. Talk about what that was like.
I was definitely very nervous at first, but everyone just really made sure that I was comfortable with it. So thank you guys, because I was a nervous wreck. But I really just got the hang of it eventually, and yeah, that's basically it. They all just taught me how to do it, so I eventually just got the hang of it.
She's being very modest, actually. She actually taught everybody around her what it is like to act. It's great. As an actor, you're constantly learning, and you're learning from people who are your peers, you're learning from people who are older than you, and you're learning from people who are going through it for the first time. Because Amiah, has this incredible quality and is a brilliant listener. And the innocence of that character and just the way that you engage with people, just reminds you of the core of what it is to act, which is to be in the moment and to be truthful, and that is so you're doing yourself down there a little bit, I think.
For sure. I mean, we would do these takes where, she had to do the empty takes. So what you do is when you shoot the shots, you shoot them once with everyone together. And then if you're playing a human character, you have to shoot that shot again. And what I said to Weta, because one of the reasons that I wanted to cast Amiah was that she was so intuitive and she would react in the moment to what was going on. And I wanted that to happen with the actors. It's all performance-based, right? And so I said to Weta, listen, this is going to be a pain, but I want to be able to use as much as possible the takes where they're all together because of the way that they would play together and because of what Amiah would do. But what was crazy was, so he would say, okay, so Dan Lemon, who was our VFX supervisor, would say, okay, but I need to get the clean plate because I can use it for paint out. So she would have to do these things. The crazy thing was she'd do it again, and your emotional memory was such that often it was just as good, and no one was there. So she's playing a scene, so these guys are playing a scene together, right? And they have that whole moment. Then everyone goes out, I play the camera move again, and she's playing by herself and playing all of the moments
pieces
again.
Of tape
with
to
nobody.
Represent the apes.
And it works, and a lot of that stuff is in the movie, so she's extraordinary. I mean, she's just an amazing
Thank
actor.
you.
Matt, talk about, I've noticed with a lot of films that were sort of written and shot over the last couple of years that there are references or emotional responses to things that may have been said in the world last year, specifically in this country during a specific campaign. And I don't think this film makes I don't
know what you're talking about.
Direct comment on it, but it clearly feels like you were inspired is the wrong word, but responding to a lot of rhetoric that was going on. I don't want to give away any spoilers for what happens in the latter half of the film, but there does seem to be some influence based off of some of the rhetoric. It's
interesting because Mark and I, we started writing 3 years ago. And so a lot of the events weren't quite as they are now, obviously. But it was a war movie. And the central question that I was interested in was this notion of empathy, this idea that when you lose the ability to recognize yourself in your adversaries, it becomes easier to destroy them, that the discourse between groups becomes coarse and demeaning, and that we can't find a commonality between us. And I think it's one of the central themes of this franchise, of Planet of the Apes. And we were doing a war movie, and what was so odd was as events were progressing, as we were making the movie, the resonance seemed to be coming closer and closer. Weirdly, the events became more like the movie than the other way around. It was a very strange thing. But for sure, we were aware of the atmospheres we were writing. But it wasn't like, hey, let's directly do this. It was more like, well, this that's happening in our world has absolute connection to the story we're exploring.
I'm curious, what films did you look back to as, when you made Dawn, you said, I think you talked a lot about Godfather Part 2 with that film. I felt like in the first half of this film, there was a fair amount of John Ford, it felt to me.
For sure,
but
The Searchers.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh yeah, The Searchers, The Outlaw Josie Wales, watched a lot of Westerns, Thin Red Line. There were, a lot. Mark and I, we spent time writing every day, but we would watch a movie a day, and we'd just try to watch movies that we loved because we were trying to tell this war epic, and we wanted to look at ones that inspired us. We look at another Pierre Boulle story, Bridge on the River Kwai, and it was that kind of story that sort of really reinforced this idea of intimacy, which was that here's this war story, but really it was a battle of wills, and really it was about the characters in the foreground. The war was the context, but the internal war in all of the characters and between the intimacy, in the intimate moments between the characters, that was what engaged you. That is what I think is so special about this franchise is that when we're looking at the behavior of these creatures, it's really an opportunity. We're looking at ourselves. We are apes, right? And what we're doing is by looking and connecting emotionally to these creatures, we're looking at the war within all of us. And I felt that since what Andy was doing in Rise. I was really, when I saw it, my son was just learning how to talk, and I'll never forget that moment when he's had this look behind his eyes the whole movie, and then all of a sudden he finally says, "No!" And you're like, whoa. And I had that same feeling when my son started speaking. And it was this weird thing of you know, it's not just about seeing ourselves, but also seeing the animal in ourselves. Like when my son was born, I was so excited because I was like, oh yeah, we're animals. He's a little animal. I love this guy. And when you could see that intelligence that was sort of building and yet not yet having the tools, and watching that articulation and being able to explore all of that and look at our nature and look at the sort of us trying to master the war within us between our different instincts, I think it's a really cool world to get to be in. For the last 5 years, this is what I've been doing with these guys, and I feel like it's a fun thing.
And now this is most likely the last film of the Apes franchise, or at least of this trilogy?
No, not necessarily. What it is it's the completion of the Caesar arc that makes him. The way that I looked at it is, this is the film that gives him mythic status, that leaves him as the legend. This leg of the story is the kind of thing that religions would be born out of, right? You would look back and say, you know, if it wasn't for him, we wouldn't be here. Right. And that was sort of the idea. When you look at the trajectory of that arc, you know, he was an ape who was meant to be put down, and someone showed him compassion, and he was raised virtually as a human, and then one day it became clear to him that he was not a member of that community, and suddenly he became an outsider, though he had felt human love, and then he was put in with apes, and he was not like them either, and had to find his connection to them. So he was this unique bridge to sort of both communities, and so he rises to be a revolutionary, and then he becomes a leader in difficult times, and this one is really much more of an internal struggle. It's about, for the first time, Andy talks about his strength being the empathy, that Caesar's strength is empathy. In this movie, he looks back at Koba and says, why didn't I understand that he couldn't live alongside humans? And that, for us, was the key to the story, which is that we wanted to push him to a place where he was in danger of losing his empathy, because that was the challenge. I wanted the audience to go on a journey where they would start to want revenge, and then to question, to implicate the audience, to implicate us. You know, it's very easy to get aroused, you know, to get those emotions aroused, and then to look at it and say, wait a minute, is that the right response? And they're not easy questions. And so that journey is an intimate journey, and it's really about him passing that test. And if he does, then he becomes the ape Moses.
Andy, obviously, based off of what you were saying about Caesar, you know a lot and you think deeply about Caesar and the arc of his story. When you're going into this third film and they present you with the screenplay, you know, how do you talk about the character with them? Do you have ideas that you want to bring to the table in regards to Caesar, or do you guys work through the script beforehand a little bit?
Well, I mean, Matt actually told me the story about 2.5 years ago. We sat down and in real time, Matt had a vision of the story and literally told me pretty much closely to what you see in the final movie. I mean, in real time, we sat down and he told me this. And I just thought it was, without obviously giving too much away, it seemed like the perfect, the perfect arc in this movie. And so then, of course, the script was written, and we go into rehearsals and ape camp, which is what we used to do before each of the films, which is ape camp. Yeah, and
talk about ape camp.
Okay, we'll get a little bit about
canoeing is the funnest by far. The macaroni art.
Who are the counselors and who are the kids at ape camp?
Well, this is the thing, you know,
Terry is the counselor.
Terry Notary is a brilliant performance capture. I mean, not performance capture. He's a performance coach, and he works with all of the different actors working on their species, whether it's a gorilla or a chimpanzee, orangutan, bonobo, whatever. They have their own ways of expressing themselves, their own way of moving, their own way of vocalizing, and so on. But it's more than that. It's more the ape camps really are about how this group of apes are together. It's how they relate to each other. What is their common language? You know, Caesar learned to sign when he was brought up by human beings. Some apes have learned to sign. Some apes just use ape vocalizations, their own. Gorillas talk in different ways to vocalize in different ways to orangutans and so on. So we have to have a consensus, and that's what Dawn is about: is a consensus of these apes coming together. Who plays what part in the hierarchy of the structure of the society? And how does that work? So in Ape Camp we do these long, involved improvisations where we just become the characters, and there's no sort of direction. There's no sort of like, we're not playing a scene. We're just being in those characters and
for like 3 hours.
Yeah, for like 3 hours.
We did a 3-hour improv. Here's the thing. So as a director, I get to be an audience, right? That's my job. My job is to look at these guys. So for 2 hours, we're in a warehouse. and they're just being apes for 2 hours. And I'm just watching them moving around. It's the greatest job in the world. It was so cool. And it's amazing to watch because what happens is Andy is Caesar, right? He is Caesar. And they all, especially the new actors coming in, they've all been working with Terry to figure out how to move. He's like the ape Zen master, right? He gets you to sit in your body. He's like, apes wouldn't do this, right? These are learned behaviors. And it's like he strips you down to your essence. He's an amazing artist. And then everybody finally comes together and they have to stay in that mode and begin instinctively reacting to each other. It's like this crazy theater game. And Andy is Caesar, and they all begin to just instinctively just move around him and respond to him. And this whole, it's like, it's amazing. It's really cool. That's what Ape Camp is.
But specifically, one of the things that changed from the Ape Camp Before Dawn into the Ape Camp for War was, again, the evolution of language. I mean, just to give you a snapshot of it, when I first played Caesar in Rise, I had chimpanzee dentures, right, which I used to wear, which made me feel more closer to an ape's physiognomy and the way that the sounds would come out. When we were working on Dawn, it was just like Caesar was beginning to use human language a lot more, but we still didn't want him to be over-articulating that language. So I was wearing a mouth guard, like sports mouth guards in my mouth, so that my tongue didn't hit the back of my teeth properly, it didn't articulate, and the words were sort of driven by emotion and an urgency. And all this we kind of worked out together, a kind of Caesar's language in Dawn. So it was, I mean, to give you an example, when Caesar would speak in Dawn, it would be more like apes do not want war. I mean, it was very sort of staccato. He's still, it's a proto kind of form of language. Whereas in this one, there's a scene at the beginning of the movie which we were in Dawn. It was in War. We were like, he's moved on. He's evolved, and the articulation is stronger. So we took out the mouth guards for this one, and connected the word to the thought in a much quicker way. But then you've always got the danger of perhaps falling off the tightrope and him sounding too human, and then it sounds like a guy, sort of just chatting, and then then it loses its apeness, and it all gets a bit weird. So.
It's weird. I mean, there was one, we actually did, the cool thing about performance capture is you can go back in and you can track it again. So Andy would explore, and we would do one more primitive and then one more articulate. And then there were some that we thought we had it right. And there's this one scene where, they've just found Nova, and Marie says something to Caesar and he doesn't really care. So he's supposed to say, let's go. And Andy did it. It was perfect. And then we rendered it, and the ape turned and it was like, let's go. And you're like, what? It was kind of like a guy going, how you doing? And you're like, this doesn't work. This doesn't work. So we had to change. And the great thing is we could keep the performance, and Andy could go in, and I said, the line needs to be more like come. And so then, Andy does it again, and he goes, come. And you're like, oh, it works. It's weird. It's a very strange process.
Steve, what about for you? How did you develop your ape's language? Because your ape has sort of, I think, developed past what we talk about for Dawn, but he still has certain features that are where he's finding words or he has speech impediments as well.
Yeah, let me just say, I can listen to these guys all day. It's incredible, especially you, Matt. That's what it sounds like when a brilliant director talks about their work, by the way. I was thrown into this world. So I had to really absorb a lot quickly. And Matt and I talked about my voice, and I didn't really think about it that much because I was just invested in this scene. And when we started shooting it, I was just, I'm with these guys who have done this for years. And so, you're thrown in the first day and, you got to perform, period. But it's easy with great people. It's fun. And
you found some amazing things, though, because the thing, each actor finds, Andy's voice as Caesar is really particular to the emotional place that he comes from. And that was same, Toby Kebbell, when he was speaking as Koba, he had a very guttural, he was like, she-sha. And it came from this, it was very, it came from this, and he watched a lot of bonobos. And you watched a lot of chimps, and I remember you telling me the zoo chimps, but what's so interesting is, and this is why you're brilliant, you found a chimp thing that was so emotionally right for your character, which I don't even know if because you just did it. But to me, his character is an incredibly lonely guy, right? He's been alone for years, and he just wants to have company, and he's so excited. And the thing that Steve found was this thing which would be the version of, there's somebody here's oh, it's this guy, but it's, ooh. And it was perfect. It was exactly because it was emotionally right for his character. And when I think of Bad Ape, I think of what you did, which is that, and people laugh because it feels so emotionally right. And that was great.
Oh, thanks. Well, thank you.
You're awesome,
I
man.
remember coming up with something that just happened in the
thing
scenes.
with the,
And it's not really in the movie. You see it a couple times
It's there, though. Yeah.
where I would go, oh, whenever I did the I would point to my lips. And I just did it once. I was like, I go. And I thought, he was taught to speak in the zoo.
Yeah.
And they would go. And so I thought, it's more like I'm always reminding myself, because, I was a bad ape.
Wait, so is that something that you naturally found while you were doing it, and then you figured out what it could mean later?
Yeah, and I liked it. And I was like, I pointed at my mouth. Like,
Well, this is the thing, and the whole thing is so instinctive.
so
Like these
fun.
guys, here's the thing about performance capture. Everybody thinks, when you're doing a normal visual effects movie, usually everything is so planned to the T. Performance capture actually allows for discovery and improvisation. And what these guys discover on the set, we go on a search and they do stuff, and he's trying that on one take and he's trying all these different things, and then things finally start to connect. You get to explore in a way that CG movies never do, because they're not necessarily gauged to be about performance. Performance capture is just a device. And what the device does is record performances, and what we're doing is exploring, and you guys went on these journeys and found these really amazing things.
Or even other movies. Forget the technology.
Oh, that's true.
I've done lots of movies where you get invited to set and there's no rehearsal, and the shots are already set up, and you have to act within the confines of what is the vision of a director or a DP. There's no exploring. There's no like, hey, we want you to, do things. It's like, no, here's the shot and here's your mark and go. That's hard. I mean, that's not fun. This was hard in a good way and free, and I felt like an actor. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I feel like a guy getting paid to wear a costume, for real, And this one, it's like I felt value.
But that's the real thing with acting, or that's the thing that you try to achieve with acting or good acting, is that you've done your work, your quote-unquote character work, and suddenly something comes out of you subconsciously, and you later figure out that you did that because in your research, your character would do something like this. But in the moment, it was just absolutely natural to subconsciously do that. That's really cool. Let's go to the audience here. Who has a question from the audience? Right here.
All right. It's a pleasure to meet all of you guys. And my question goes out to Andy. Did you have a favorite character or moment in the original Planet of the Apes that inspired you to take the role of Caesar?
I love the original Planet of the Apes, and for me, it was practically one of my first memories of seeing films in the cinema. Actually, was seeing the original Planet of the Apes, and my memories. My key memory was seeing human beings being snatched up in the cornfields with nets, with chimps on horseback. I mean, that shot when they come towards you and scoop up into a net. I think that moment was kind of like I had never seen anything like this. It was so shocking. It was so kind of, and of course the shot of the movie, the biggest, greatest reveal in cinema history, practically, of the Statue of Liberty. But so there wasn't. I mean, the characters. I mean, I remember Roddy McDowall and his character and that journey. But it didn't. What inspired me to, what was brilliant about the Rise script, the reboot, the prequel, was that it felt totally fresh. Actually, it felt unlike anything I'd ever seen. So I didn't really base it on anything from the original Planet of the Apes, although obviously I was passionate about the world and the metaphor and the idea and the social commentary that surrounded the original Planet of the Apes.
Now, I'm curious, do you find that your film or your take on the world of Planet of the Apes is in some ways, specifically with this film, a kind of response or an antithesis to the original Apes in terms of the political message at the end of the first Planet of the Apes? The original Planet of the Apes, excuse me.
A response? Well, it's interesting. I think the way that I have always looked at these films' relationship to the original, and specifically the 68, the ending that Andy talks about, that mind-blowing ending that's, we destroyed ourselves. Why is this planet like this? Because it's our planet, and evolution has brought us there. you can't do that again, right? There's no way to surprise the audience. That story, that's already out of the bag. So what I have always thought was interesting is the opportunity that was presented because we know the ending, because it changes the narrative idea of the film. It's not about what happens. We know what happens. It becomes Planet of the Apes. And so then it becomes about how does that happen? And movies that are about how are always really interesting because they're about character and they're about motivation and they're about what drives us, right? And so it becomes an opportunity to explore our nature in a very intimate way because we know where it's going, and the question is, well, why did that happen? This world is still not like the '68 world movie. Why? Why do they enslave humans? When do they start treating them like cattle? What is it in them? And to me, there's always this thing about like, oh, comparing the apes and the humans. To me, the apes are the humans, and I wanted that for often the humans are seen in this particular iteration as villainous, but we don't try to do that. We're trying to show their perspective as well. But I think that the apes are also fallible. I mean, Caesar in this, he makes a lot of questionable choices, and the idea is to draw the audience along in that so that they can question the choices that they are aligning themselves with too, to sort of wake you up and go, wait, I wanted him to kill that guy. And to get drawn into those ideas. So I see it more as a narrative relationship, which is this idea that we're never gonna get back to the '68 original. That was never idea is to remake that movie. The idea is that these movies all exist in kind of the same universe, and this is like the Russian ape novel, chapter after chapter, that gives us all the detail of how it eventually becomes that.
Next question.
Hey guys, I actually got a chance to see an early screening for it, and I thought it was really amazing. It affected me mentally and emotionally at some parts, so, thank you for that. I know you guys were talking about body language with the characters. I was wondering, what was it like getting to film those scenes and getting to act in them as well? Like, did you like maybe study? I think you guys mentioned like chimpanzees or apes. Like you guys.
Oh yeah, well these guys can talk to that. I can just tell you. First of all, I have to say, I mean, people always talk about performance capture, and we talk a lot about it today. And the gift for me, on these two movies has been to get to work with this man, because he's just one of the greatest people and one of the greatest actors on the planet. He's just incredible. And I think that people, they don't understand what performance capture is, and that's what we're talking about here. He's not doing something technical, except for the technical exercise that's connected to playing his character, right? So the gait and all of those things, those are all things that he does as part of his research, and then it has to be forgotten. As Steve says, he has to figure out how to do all the ape stuff as a baseline, because you have to forget that. That's not your character. Your character has a limp. That's not your character. You have to learn how to do that and then forget it, and then emotionally, you have to become the character. And the going on the emotional search with these guys is a joy, and lots of surprises happen. The whole point is we go on an exploration, and Andy, you actually asked, or somebody asked earlier about the script, and Andy, he loved the story, but Andy always has brilliant ideas, and sometimes he'll say, God, I don't know if I would do that, and he's almost always right, and then it leads to something else, and we have a discussion, and again, these movies, you don't get to do that, but we did on these, which is like, hey, well, what would happen? I remember that happening on Dawn. It was such an exciting thing, because we didn't have a script when we began Dawn, and it was like, well, let's just figure this out, guys. Where do you feel like you're gonna stand, Andy? And we would just explore it the way that you would do in an independent movie, right? So the performances, these guys are incredible, and it's an amazing thing. You have to talk to them about how they prepare, but I can tell you that is challenging, but it's the least part of it. The big part of it is how they connect emotionally to what they're playing and how they are expressing themselves. And I knew, as Mark and I were writing this story, that we were going to push Caesar to the darkest place emotionally, and the reason I was writing it with Mark the way we were doing it is because I knew that it was going to be him, and that he was going to go there, and that it was going to be amazing to watch. And you should see the effects guys who are on the set. Andy will do something, like, and there's a couple scenes, there's a scene between, one of the last scenes between him and Woody Harrelson. He's so emotional, it's crazy. And literally you could see the guys at Weta going, oh my God, how are we going to do that? Because the challenge is to take what you're seeing on their faces and then translate it onto an anatomy that, like, Caesar doesn't look like Andy, right? He
Believe
doesn't,
it or not.
but I can't see, what's that?
Believe it or not.
He doesn't, but I can't see Caesar without seeing Andy's expressions, because what they're doing is finding a way to express those shapes that give us Like, there's a movie that is these guys, it's Planet of the Mocap Guys, and that's the movie we make first. And you laugh, but that movie works really well, and I'd love to show it one day, because what you're seeing is these guys play the movie, and it's not a tribe of apes, it's a tribe of mocap guys. These guys in these dots and these really tight suits, and you're going, it's like an S&M movie, it's weird. But it totally works emotionally, because the essence of what's going on is they are playing their characters, and you just believe it, and you forget about the cameras and the dots after the first 5 seconds. And the challenge for Weta is to find the way to make sure that we feel the same thing watching Caesar, watching Bad Ape, that we feel watching these guys.
That's such a fascinating moment where your VFX guys are worried that their hardest job is doing
They're
justice
excited.
to how good their performance
For sure.
is.
Yeah, I mean, that was my thing on and I have to say, Weta is incredible. I mean, when you think about what they do, they're just in terms of like making the apes appear photoreal and doing all of that, that is incredible. It's part of what makes the emotionality work, because you don't question, you forget, especially in this movie, this is a high watermark. You look at these effects and you stop thinking about the fact that they're CG creations. You just go with it. After the first 5 minutes, you're like, oh, this is what it is. And then you just start connecting to the emotions.
It's unbelievable.
Yeah, they start becoming invisible, that part, which is amazing. And that the challenge of that is just extraordinary, and they're the best in the world in it. And yet the hardest part is to figure out not to do that part, which is amazing, but how to express the emotions, because the performance is all about the emotions and translating shapes that are on Andy's face that don't exist on Caesar's face, because, as we said, he doesn't look like him, right? His anatomy is totally different, is a challenge. And what we do is we get into these debates about what I think I'm seeing on Andy's face, and I say, how do we get that on Caesar's face? And they figure it out. It's an amazing process.
I think we have time for one more question right here.
Hi. So one of the best aspects of this film that I love is how, towards the second half of the film, how it homages so many different biblical epics from the 1950s, including Ben-Hur and the Ten Commandments. So I was wondering, when all of you saw the film, how did that? What was your reaction to seeing this be amazingly connected to that in the way how it's presented?
I want to add to that also the Apocalypse Now, which was just like, did you just feel like we have to do this?
Well, I thought, here's the thing. I mean, I did think we had to do it. It was a late thing, but I started thinking,
shy away from this.
Well, I don't want to not only not shy away from it, but also I thought, see, what I was always trying to think is, but what would the humans be saying? And there's a gallows humor, always to these movies to a certain degree, right? This idea that the human race at the time that was written was dying because of the simian flu. It was the ape-pocalypse now. And these guys were being imprisoned because they were sick, and they were being separated from others so that they wouldn't affect us. It was us turning on our own kind and losing empathy for each other in one of the darkest moments in what it would have been the history of the planet, right? And it just seemed like in that moment, it would be right to not only reference what we were doing story-wise and thematically, but also to talk about the way that humanity deals with darkness, which is to find a way to make a joke in its direst moments. And so that's where that joke came from. But yeah, I don't know. Were you guys, when you were watching it, because to me, I always, there's a moment at the end that is like the parting of the Red Sea, and there were definitely, I really did think of it as a biblical epic, and Mark and I did watch Ben-Hur, and we did watch Ten Commandments, and did that come through to you guys when you were watching it?
I mean, yeah. I mean, obviously, we kind of knew we were in that world, and we talked about it, and we talked about the journey of Caesar being a Moses-like character. But it's interesting why we chose, or why you chose specifically to play this intimacy out, to play apes against that biblical canvas, and there's something about those films that that is sadly lacking in a lot of filmmaking in this genre, in the blockbuster world, and that is the truth and trusting in the story and trusting in the honesty of the story without pulling the wool over the audience in some kind of way. A sort of, a nod and a wink to the audience and sort of sending it up. And what those 50s films had was a great belief in the power of storytelling and mythic storytelling, and that you're swept along with that, and that you don't question it. You're completely suspending your disbelief and following these characters, and that's why I think it's an important.
And in Ben-Hur and in the Ten Commandments, I actually think about this too. Is that when we were doing this, I felt that this was the kind of story that, in retrospect, would give birth to a religion. But you're seeing all the scientific reasons that these things happen, right? So the test that comes is about who's stronger. It's a Darwinian test. And so what you're seeing there is the birth of a religion in retrospect, because we need myths. We need to understand ourselves in a way that as creatures, we have a hard time doing, right? It's beyond our capacity. This is the way I look at it. And so there are these references, but they weren't chosen to say, hey, because we want to do Ben-Hur. It was like, this is how a story like Ben-Hur gets created in the ape world, which is that you look at the way that nature pits these two species, and the stronger and the smarter will out and will win, and then from that the myth is born, the legend is born. And so, I think sometimes people think, oh, you're doing a legend because wouldn't that be cool if you could do, ape this movie, ape that movie, and so to speak. And but the idea was really, I have a love of cinema, and I love the idea of finding these references, but putting them in a new context. And the context here is very Planet of the Apes. So
you say we need myths. Myths is also story, and that goes to empathy as well. Stories are what help us empathize with others, and that goes back to the sort of biblical epic and the myths as well. Guys, I love the film so much, I have to let you go. It opens this Friday. See it on the big screen. Really don't see it anywhere else. Just see it on the big screen. It cries
Agreed.
for it. War for the Planet of the Apes opens this Friday, July 14th. Thank you so much, guys.